What does the Declaration of Independence, J.P. Morgan, tailored suits, and Moses have in common? My, oh my. Another episode of the Gilded Age. Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today I'm coming to you all with yet another episode of the Gilded Age, Season 3, Episode 2, What the Papers Say. This episode is directed by Deborah Kampmeyer. She's directed episodes 2 and 4 in our previous season, and it is great, of course, to see her back on board for this one. And as always, this episode is written by Julian Fellows and Sonia Warfield. So I'm finding that the easiest thing for me to do as far as following the storylines is just kind of sectioning them off as far as the households and the specific characters and subplots within that household. So in this case, I'm going to start with Peggy and the Scotts. We see that Peggy is still recovering from her illness, and as a result, her parents, Arthur and Dorothy, Mr. and Mrs. Scott, have arrived to check on her. And when Dorothy attempts to go through the servants' entrance, Arthur makes it clear, ain't no second-class citizens over here. We'll be going through the front door or bust. And of course, I ended up being right about the fact that Dr. Kirkland, which is Elizabeth Kirkland's son, he has shown up to check on Peggy and assist with this illness. Dr. Kirkland informs the Scotts that for now, it's best that Peggy remain where she is. And while Dorothy is relieved that Peggy's okay, Arthur is just kind of like, he has a side eye for all of this. He doesn't understand why it took so long for them to be called, how they weren't able to clock Peggy's illness early on. None of this is vibing well with him. And although Agnes does apologize for the situation that was partly caused because of the doctor, to Arthur, much like myself, water is very much wet. Later, we see Dr. Kirkland paying Peggy another visit, and it's clear she's doing much better. And we learn that he actually used to visit Arthur's pharmacy as a child. And that is what spurred his passion and desire to become a doctor in the first place. I also neglected to mention in the last episode that the Christian Recorder wants to publish some excerpts from Peggy's upcoming novel, which of course is a huge accomplishment. And the fact that Dr. Kirkland is very keen on reading it as well, let's just say it's the cherry on top of the sundae. Additionally, as a result of Peggy's efforts, we discover that the family's cousin, Athena Trumbo, is very keen to have Peggy speak at a women's group in Newport. Although this does mean time away from work, Agnes is more than happy to grant Peggy that time. And Dorothy is very surprised to see someone like Agnes as such a progressive person. And at one point, we hear Agnes tell Arthur and Dorothy that she and Ada's father was a patron and a supporter of the Institute for Colored Youth, which Arthur finds comical because it's like, am I supposed to be impressed by that? And when Agnes makes it clear to Dorothy in their later conversation that she doesn't see race, simply manners, Arthur clocks that very quickly and says, I'm not quite sure how manners can erase 250 years of slavery, but sure, why not? And it's so interesting to me because I think the whole colorblind argument, or just being colorblind, not seeing race, I feel like it used to be a positive thing back in the day. And I think it was meant to make it clear that, hey, I don't see you as any different than anyone else. You know, I don't look down on you because of your race or your skin tone, color, whatever. But I think that unfortunately, as we have evolved as a society, we realize that being colorblind is also being blind to issues that affect certain communities and certain people overall. So yes, we can say that, I don't see race, but it also means that you may not be seeing the issues that systematically and politically affect me overall. So we're kind of getting away from that as a solution of sorts or even as a statement. It's like, I get it, I understand the sentiment, but it goes deeper than that. And we've seen how allies can be very performative and how there can be a lot of unconscious bias and deeper issues that go along with that. So I definitely appreciate the fact that Arthur was willing to clock that and, not really let that ride. And although Agnes had clearly blinded herself to the reality of the situation regarding the doctor, she also thought to an extent that the doctor's sympathies might kick in, considering her very own traumatizing situation with Oscar when he was younger and she nearly lost him to typhoid. We know Agnes can be quite the battle axe, but it's clear in this moment she's trying to really open up and make it clear that despite the flaws in how she assessed the situation, there is something much deeper that she wants to relate and make clear to both of them. The one thing I'll say about this as a subplot is that I wish we had dealt with the nuances of what it means to perhaps be raised with that perspective of, manners and not looking down, and maybe dealing with the fact that you did have some views or that your world allowed you to not necessarily see that community as something even worthy of notice. For me, I'm someone who enjoys complexity, so it would have been interesting if writing-wise we were able to deal with the shades of gray in between the situation. I understand they're trying to point to the hollowness of what Agnes and even Ada are saying in relation to Peggy, but I kind of would have preferred to see maybe the layers to that. Has Agnes always felt this way? How does she really see people in that community? It's like it can be both. Both things can be true, and I wish we could have taken that route, but ultimately the characters have an understanding. Arthur, Dorothy, and Agnes, they're able to get past the smokescreen of the prejudice that led to the situation. And it's good to at least see that they have a better understanding of each other as a result of this. Elsewhere in the Brooke household, we see that Ada's desire to push Temperance forward has pretty much everybody in a chokehold. She has the staff signing these pledges that ensures that they will not buy, sell, or drink intoxicating liquors, and also help prevent the sale and use of the same by others. Clearly, most of the staff understandably have a side-eye for this pledge. As far as Oscar is concerned, we see that his former side piece John, or maybe current, given John's behavior, it appears that John is willing to help Oscar by giving him money to invest and eventually double. And I'm just like, John, why? Why are you wasting your time with this man? I'm just like, I try. I try so hard with Oscar, but I have zero tears to give. Later, we see Aurora visiting, and although Bannister is still in a state of confusion regarding the real mistress of the household, Aurora officially hands that title over to Ada, much to Agnes's chagrin. Aurora may not be able to solve the problem of her husband blowing up her world, but she can at least resolve this minor issue in the meantime. Speaking of which, we see the demonic Ken doll known as Charles Fane show up at their household, grab some clothes and belongings, and leave without a kind word or shred of sympathy for his soon-to-be ex-wife. Aurora is clearly struggling to hold it together, but she manages to hold on long enough to throw the Young Women's Christian Association charity benefit at her home. And it's here that we are briefly introduced to Charlotte Astor, Mrs. Astor's other daughter, and Carrie's older sister. If Mrs. Astor's behavior is any indication, Charlotte may or may not be a bit of a problem child for her, especially since she seems to have no problem flirting with other men at the benefit, despite being a married woman. It seems that infidelity is a running theme here, and who would know that better than Charles Fane? Charles clearly doesn't give a fig about optics, which is evidenced when he shows up at the home he has shared with Aurora and the benefit with his mistress.
Oh, hell no!
And he does this despite the fact that Aurora has told Mrs. Astor and the other women that the reason for his absence is illness. But now everyone can see what's really going on, from Mrs. Astor all the way to Bertha. I'm not gonna lie, Mrs. Astor's face when Aurora was fumbling and bumbling, trying to come up with an explanation, that took me out. She was like, okay, I'm out. Thank you and good night. And when Charles attempts to appeal to his Aunt Agnes to talk sense into Aurora, Agnes makes it very clear, I am not your Aunt Agnes anymore. Meanwhile, we see that Jack's journey towards inventorship is continuing onward with the help of Larry. Now, in the previous episode, we had a very questionable situation where Larry was attempting to present Jack's ideas on behalf of Jack at these meetings, but without knowing the terminology, without really understanding the inner workings of everything, and it looked like it was about to turn into a little bit of a Shaky situation. But thankfully, that is not the case, as Larry will now be having Jack involved in the meetings. Unfortunately, we also discover in the last episode that Adelheid and some of the other household staff feel that he's attempting to move beyond his station. Moving beyond the station, I'm just like, isn't that the whole point of all of this anyway? If we don't grow, if we don't change, if we don't elevate, then what's the point? Jack naturally is nervous about looking presentable and just looking the part overall, but Larry comes through with a suit tailoring and some additional advice that understated elegance never goes out of style. We also see Larry finding the time to snatch up Marion into the nearest carriage and slop her down and declare his love. Which Marion is, a little bit overwhelmed by. It's like, oh, okay, sure. Ada naturally is over the moon at this development, but Marion is still very much cautious about this whole thing, and it's very understandable. But as Marion heads out to dinner with Larry and his family and the Duke of Buckingham, Ada cannot resist floating once again her passion for Temperance by suggesting that the Duke of Buckingham get involved. And Agnes completely blows that out of the water by saying he's English. His loyalty is to the Queen and to the bottle, and not necessarily in that order. All right, now we're going to circle back to the very, very beginning where we see Adelheid and the household staff running around trying to figure out why Gladys is missing and where she's gone. And let me say really quickly, that shot of Adelheid running down the hallway and the crane shot and us pulling back to see the entire staircase and foyer and the parlor, yes, chef's kiss. Despite the initial panic, Bertha discovers, through a note written to her by Mrs. Carleton, that Gladys has run away to Mrs. Carleton's home to be with Billy and escape Bertha's marriage agenda. And when Bertha makes it clear that this entire situation with Gladys and Billy will not be happening, Mrs. Carleton decides to pull rank. She lets her know that her great-great-grandfather signed the Declaration of Independence. But Bertha is not fazed. After all, she has an English duke in the mix. And in Gilded Age New York society, that easily trumps American patriotism. In the meantime, we see George pitching the idea of a cross-country railroad system to J.P. Morgan. Yes, the J.P. Morgan. And I know I said this in my teaser reaction, but I didn't realize that Bill Kemp is the same actor who portrayed the father in Sirens, which I just finished watching not that long ago. But yeah, so that was actually a pleasant surprise. JP feels that attempting to make this happen is going to be like Moses parting the Red Sea. But he reluctantly agrees, albeit after letting George know that if he fails, he's on his own. When he gets home, of course, the you-know-what has officially hit the fan. And George is just trying to keep up with everything that's going on. And somehow there's all this gossip in the newspapers about Gladys already being engaged to the Duke. And it's strange. No one can imagine where that information could have come from. But George is no fool. He knows his wife very, very well. And it's clear that her fingerprints are all over this one. And it's the same dynamic. Gladys wants nothing to do with the Duke. She loves Billy. She wants to marry him and marry for love. George is trying to support her, but Bertha is also in his ear. So it's kind of like the angel and the devil. And he's trying to figure out which one to listen to. And I will say this, despite Bertha being just a little bit of a sociopath and doing the most, I do think that she, like many parents, do things like this for their children out of a twisted sense of love and devotion to their children. You know what they say about parents who provide and they feel like that's enough. And so because she came from nothing and because she was nothing, she feels that she has to give her children the best of everything, the best opportunities, the best influence, the ladder to the top of society, which marrying the Duke would give Gladys, but Gladys is just not that person. And Bertha cannot take that. At the benefit, we see Bertha laying down the law to Mrs. Carlton and making it clear that if Gladys and Billy continue down this path, her husband will ensure that Billy never gets another job, and Gladys, as a result, will be disinherited. I mean, these are not ideal circumstances, but considering that Alva Vanderbilt threatened to shoot her daughter Consuelo's real love if she refused to marry the Duke, perhaps this isn't the worst case scenario. To make matters even worse, Gladys's sincere hope that Billy would be there for her and help her see this through comes crashing down when he lets her know that he's not equipped to handle this. He can't take it, he can't deal with it, and he's not the man for her. We also see Bertha drawing a clear line of demarcation between herself and George on this matter. He might handle the railroads, but she's the one who handles society. But George is still quite unprepared when the Duke of Buckingham, aka Hector, shows up at the dinner with his lawyer, which means that an arrangement has been put in place, one that Bertha told George nothing about, and he is less than pleased about it. As Bertha strolls into the dining room to officially kick off dinner, we see George informing Gladys that regarding this situation, I'll take care of it. Look, they might live under the same roof, but it is clear, if it wasn't clear before, it is definitely clear now, that Bertha and George are running two very different empires. And since we already know what happens when two empires don't see eye to eye, it seems that the war for Gladys's future has officially begun. And that closes out Season 3, Episode 2, What the Papers Say. So from Episode 1 to Episode 2, it looks like we went from the Wild Wild West to a Wild Wild Mess. And there's a lot going on. I'm really interested in seeing how some of these things are going to play out. And I am more than excited to see Newport and the Black Lead and Athena and Elizabeth and all these other characters that I talked about in my teaser reaction. I'm very, very excited about that. And as far as everything else, I'm just really interested to see what George is going to do and how he's going to go up against Bertha. Because, listen, they are both strong-willed people. And it's one thing to have that kind of determination regarding society or regarding the railroad and the industry as a whole. But when they turn that energy on each other, how is that going to go? My answer, not well. And as always, please feel free to leave your thoughts regarding my recap and this episode as a whole. Tell me how you feel about how everything is going down and how you think this whole situation with Bertha and George is going to play out. Yeah, I'm really interested in hearing what you all have to say because this is going to be very, very stressful to watch. So, once again, this is D, Movieman, signing off, and I'll see you with the movies.